Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Meets Literature. We are on episode 9, very close to episode 10, double digits. Almost. But I'm very excited about today's episode. It's just going to be very chill, chatting about some of our current and recent reads and just, a bunch of nonsense in there as well. But before we begin, I am your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
Yes, so please do give us a follow. It will help us immensely. So, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm a little tired today from the sun, but it's been good.
Yeah, lots of sun action recently.
Yeah, especially over this past weekend. Lots of sun.
Lots of sun, very hot, but it's been fun.
That's true. I think I would always rather have the sun and heat over winter and darkness.
Yes, I'd much rather have the sun as well. We'll be getting a lot more sun over the next couple of months. But I will take the heat over the cold.
Agreed.
In more exciting news, our save the dates for our wedding are almost ready. I mean, I have a whole box of them printed, but I just need to finish addressing some envelopes. And then we'll be good to send them off.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. I'm handwriting everyone's address on the envelopes, which is really not an easy task, especially if someone has a really long name, because the envelopes are postcard size. So it's really small. So I have to make sure I write really small, but not too small. And some of them ended up kind of crooked.
But, it's a little wonky.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's just the envelope. It's not the actual contents that's inside.
Right. Nobody's going to look twice at the envelope.
No, they might just be like, oh, this handwriting could be better. But
yeah, that's what they're going to think. They're going to do what everyone does nowadays when you get an actual real piece of mail. They're going to go, what in the world? What is this? What is this for? And then they're going to open it up and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I feel like nobody gets actual mail anymore.
Right. It's all just bills and junk.
Yeah, but handwriting it reminds me of that one scene we just watched in 90 Day Fiancé of the girl telling her fiancé to write in cursive because it has to be fancy because it's a wedding invitation.
Right.
I have thoughts about that because I really don't think your envelopes have to be fancy. It's more of what's inside the envelope, I think, that matters.
Right. I would agree because the outside is like just, it has a purpose. Like you want it to be legible for a reason. It doesn't have to be fancy though.
Right. And I mean, it's going to get ruined when it goes through the post office anyway.
Right. It's probably going to like smudged up or something.
It's going to get dirty.
Right.
Like no one's saving your fancy envelope.
And that's the other thing too. Yeah. If anything, someone might save the date and like put it on the fridge, but they're just going to throw away the envelope.
Yeah. I throw away all the envelopes. I'm like, okay, this is a fancy envelope, but why would I keep it?
I don't even know if I've ever used the word fancy to describe an envelope. I just like open it and I just throw the envelope away immediately.
I mean, fancy envelopes definitely do exist, but they're just not something that I care about.
I think that's fair.
But aside from that, we are in a great spot with the wedding, and that's exciting. So before we really get into this episode, it is the middle of the year. We are already halfway through 2024.
That's crazy to think about.
I know. Believe it or not, we're halfway through 2024. And I just kind of wanted to circle back and see if either of us have any mid-year goals, reading or otherwise. I know you have had your yearly mid-year crisis.
Yep. I have essentially a midlife crisis just about probably twice a year.
Yes, you
where
do.
I feel the need to reinvent myself and find a new hobby or do something new and exciting and fun. This time I have landed on, building like the workshop in the garage is kind of what it's evolved into, which I'm excited for. But I think I should set a reading goal of some kind.
I mean, you don't need a reading goal.
No, but as people are going to realize by the end of this episode, you've read like 8 No, 6 books in the span of me reading 1. So I think maybe I should probably bump those numbers up a little bit.
I mean, maybe, but I don't think it really matters.
No, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but...
I mean, everyone's going to read as much as they can read. Reading's not a competition.
It could be.
It could be a competition, but I feel like it would be a very horrible competition because I feel like whoever is reading less would just feel really bad about themselves.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, so it's like, one thing I can't stand about Bookstagram sometimes is that some people try and make it a competition. They're like, oh, I've already read 100 books and we're only in July. And I'm like, okay, I've read 70, which is still a lot. But you keep seeing all these people like, oh, I read this many. And like, yeah, it's good to track your progress. But at the same time, it just kind of feels icky sometimes when you see all that and you're like, I really need to read more.
Yeah, I guess it promotes like sort of a negative culture, I guess. Because it's like if you're not reading enough books, you're not a real reader or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some people on there that are like that. And I'm like, okay, hate that, but I'll just ignore you.
I guess that's fair.
But it's fun to see where everyone's at too. Like just random people out there, how they're reading. I mean, some people only read like 3 books a month, which is sometimes a lot for them. And they're all excited about it. But then when you have somebody commenting on their post being like, oh, well, I read 12 this month or I read 20 this month, then it's just like, why are you commenting that on this person's post that read 3 books?
Yeah, that's weird energy for sure.
It is weird energy.
You should start making them prove it. Be like, all right, drop the synopsis of every single book right now.
That would be so hard even for me. I'd be like, I cannot remember anything that any of these books are about.
Guess you're not a real reader.
I guess not.
Sorry.
But I do write a review after I read every single book. So
well, that's good. Get your thoughts out.
I would just have to go back and look at the review to kind of jog my memory.
I think that's fair. I feel like most books that I read tend to go in and out pretty quickly. But as for my goal, I think I want to make at least a little something. I know a lot of people talk about like the 10 pages a day.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say that that's doable for me. I get a little nervous because sometimes there's just not time to fit 10 pages in. Maybe I should start with like 5.
Well, how quickly do you read? Because I could read 10 pages between 10 to 15 minutes.
I'm probably a little bit slower than that. I would say I'm probably like on the 15-minute side. I would say on average though, because it also depends on like the writing and what the book is about.
Oh, definitely. Sometimes I'm sitting there staring at a page for what feels like an eternity.
Yeah, especially because I read a lot of fantasy books. So they tend to, depending on the author, they tend to be like overly complex or complicated sometimes. And so that can definitely slow down the reading. But if it's like, I remember the one sort of fantasy/romance book that I read, that one was super easy read because it was all they didn't go super in depth on complicated topics essentially.
Well, what if instead of setting a page goal per day, you just set a time goal and just read however many pages you can within that time? Like half an hour a day, how many pages you could read. And then you'd probably end up reading more.
I think that's probably a much better idea, especially for myself.
That's why I'm here, to give the good ideas.
That's true.
But as for me, I'm at a good spot with my actual reading goal because my goal was to read 100 books this year. And I'm already at like 70-ish, I think. I would have to look up that stat exactly. I'm at a good spot with that. But one of my goals this year was that I wanted to read more of my actual shelves and the books that I own. But that's been a big epic fail because I keep going to the library. And so I keep reading books from the library and not my actual shelves.
That's a little bit of a good problem to have though, because you're at least supporting, your local library.
I am going to the library and I'm saving myself money because I'm not going out and buying the book that I want to read. I'm just borrowing it.
Right.
But at the same time, I keep staring at my shelves and I'm like, I really want to read this, but I can't because I have this whole stack of like 5 library books.
Right, and those obviously expire, so you have to read those first.
They do, and sometimes I grab them off of the new shelf, and when you grab them off the new shelf, you can't renew them, So if I don't finish it in the 3 weeks that I have, it just has to go back. So I'm on a time crunch.
Yeah, that's true.
So one of my goals going into the second half of the year is definitely going to be to limit my library checkouts so I can read more books that I actually own.
What do you think you would limit it to?
Maybe 1 or 2.
Or because it's like a 2-week rental?
It's a 3-week loan. But then that doesn't count my Libby holds. But I don't really use Libby that much. I really only have been using it recently for my Percy Jackson buddy read, which, yes, I am mentioning it again this episode. But I haven't been using it for other things really. And I also really only use it for audiobooks too.
Well, that's also a good question. Since you want to read your physical library, are you also going to limit your like Kindle books too?
Well, you see, I pay for Kindle Unlimited, so I have to use Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, I'm not getting my money's worth. And there's so many Kindle Unlimited books that I want to read as well. But I feel like if I stop going to the actual library just for like a month or 2, I can read my Kindle books and my actual shelves and knock off like a huge chunk of that TBR.
I think that's probably a good time frame to give yourself.
I can read multiple books at once. So like laying in bed at night, I could read my Kindle book because it's easier to hold than a physical book in the dark with the book light, which makes it really heavy. It hurts my hands. And then during the day, I could just read the physical book of whatever I'm reading. And a lot of the books that I own are also paperbacks, which a book light is very hard to keep still on a paperback, especially when it's a floppy paperback, because then I feel like that book light's just going to rip that book in half.
That's true. I wonder if I could get you another one that's like maybe lighter or something.
I mean, I don't really need 2 book lights. Like it works. Like I just clamp it around like half of the book pages.
Oh, so it's like tougher, yeah.
Yeah, so that works. But I just think if I can limit my library loans, I can make headway on my physical TBR.
Yeah, I think that's a good goal.
So I'm going to hold myself to it. It is now officially being said on the internet for everyone to hear. So everyone out there can hold me accountable for that as well. So I'm excited to be heading into the second half of the year. I always feel like mid-year is a good time to like reevaluate everything.
Yeah, I think the back half of the year is typically more fun than the start of the year. Obviously, you have like your holidays and stuff, but you're usually going into it with a more positive attitude because you're coming out of summer, of like the nice, warm, nice weather. Well, in this case, hot weather, but...
Yeah, that's true. Today's episode, as I mentioned earlier, is just going to be chill, talk about our current and recent reads and just, you know, all of this nonsensical stuff that we sometimes talk about. I'm like teasing everyone today. Before we get into our current and recent reads, I feel like we haven't talked about what we're obsessed with recently. I don't know what you've been obsessed with. You probably don't know what I've been obsessed with. Well, maybe you do because I'm very easy to read sometimes. But what have you been obsessing over?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, this is my bi-yearly quarter life crisis. So in reinventing myself again, I have found the idea of learning a new skill always fun. Mm-hmm. And the one I settled on for some reason was learning how to lockpick.
That is just an oddly specific thing.
Yes. And for anybody that's curious, it is like a fine thing to do as long as the locks that you are picking are not installed anywhere and you own them. It's perfectly legal. It's fun though, because I got some like a beginner set and then these locks that increase in difficulty. And it's very interesting because for some reason I expected it to just be very, not easy, but simplistic. You just do this, do that, and then you're in, like you follow sort of a flow chart. But as I started doing it, it's way more intricate than I realized. And there is like a lot of obviously skill, but even the individual locks sort of have their own tell to them and they're all individually unique, even if they are the same locks, essentially. it's kind of neat. It's been fun so far, at least. I definitely am not good at it at all, but it's been fun.
Have you messed with them already?
Yeah, that's what I was doing earlier.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah. I got a starter set of picks and turning tools and a lock progression set. So it starts with like 2 pins, 3 pins, 4 pins, 5 pins. And I think it's like your typical lock has 5 or 6 pins, I think.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, when you put a key in a lock, right?
Right.
It makes that like noise. You'll realize it next time you do it, but basically inside of a lock, there's all these little pins that hang down, and the key presses them up in a certain specific configuration that allows the driver pins, I think is what they're called, to go to the shear line, which is what allows you to open up a lock. This is like a little mini Wikipedia hour. You're going to learn a little bit about locks. But that's the whole point of when you pick a lock, that's what you're trying to do, just without the key.
Interesting. So how did you come across lockpicking as your mid-year crisis hobby?
Well, so naturally it was Reddit. That's where I go to get all of my hobby ideas. Whenever I reinvent myself, I have like a criteria.
Okay.
It has to be cheap to get started.
Right.
It has to ideally be something I can physically do, like a skill of some kind, not in the same vein of like a new video game, because that's just doing things I'm already used to. And then it also has to be self-contained, like it has to be small because we don't have a lot of space. So those criteria limit like a lot of things. And so for whatever reason, I think I was just searching again, and I happened to, I think, follow the EDC or everyday carry, where people talk about just like cool little toolkits that you carry in your car or on your person, whatever. And a lot of them talk about lockpicks. And so then I stumbled across the lockpicking subreddit and then just sort of thought the idea that might be cool to learn.
It's just such a random thing.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is like odd and out there.
Like, will you ever need to pick a lock in real life?
Hopefully not, because that typically means that you're locked out of somewhere. But no, I mean, I guess it's a cool hobby because it's also a possibly useful skill. So like if I locked myself out of my house, or if a friend needed to get in somewhere, hopefully his house, not going to be breaking in anywhere. But then, you could help them get in without having to pay however much money it is to get a locksmith. I don't know if I'll ever develop the ability to even do that. I'll probably just be doing sort of practice locks or beginner locks for the foreseeable future.
Maybe I don't understand because I'm not a man.
Maybe it is a bit of like a guy stereotypical thing.
It is such a guy thing. Like, it's a guy thing to pick a new hobby that's like something you're not really going to use that often.
A useless niche hobby.
A useless hobby, yeah.
Yeah, that tends, well, a lot of the times, for some reason, as a guy, there's like a stigma that anything that you do has to be useful, no matter how niche. Even with your hobbies, you're like, I got to find something that is at least could potentially be useful.
Well, I hope lockpicking solves your mid-year crisis.
Yeah, we'll see. That's the other thing, is I got to hope it sticks.
Well, what else would you do?
Making the workshop in the garage is going to be part of this too. And so that might spur on new hobbies or new skills or what have you. So we'll see where that goes. But for now, it's lockpicking.
Fun stuff.
Yes. What are you currently obsessed with?
I am currently obsessed with that one salad from Panera with the strawberries and blueberries and pineapples and oranges and that poppy seed dressing. It's so good. I can't remember what the salad is actually called. Oh, there's also walnuts in it, but it is delicious. I bought all the ingredients to make it at home, and I've been eating it for lunch for the past few days. And it is the tastiest salad that I've ever had.
It also has chicken in it, right?
Yes, but you don't have to put chicken in it. I haven't been putting chicken in it, mainly because we don't have any chicken to put in it.
It is called the strawberry poppy seed chicken salad.
Oh, well, how original.
I'm not sure why they called it that because, well, I guess strawberries are in it and the poppy seed dressing and then obviously chicken. but there's like a ton of other fruit in there too. So it's a little bit misleading. They maybe could have done a better job on that.
It's like a fruit salad with lettuce in it and walnuts.
That is probably a better description, I would say.
Who knew that combining fruits and lettuce and this dressing would be so delicious? I'm thoroughly obsessed, and it's all I want to eat. And the poppy seed dressing really makes it next level. I feel like if I used any other dressing, it just wouldn't be the same.
It definitely smells good. Like when you made it for lunch, it smells really, really good.
It does smell good and it tastes really good. And poppy seed dressing, I really don't know how they make it, but I know it has like some sort of like oniony flavor to it as well, but it's also kind of sweet. I didn't really look at the ingredients on the dressing bottle.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know much about it.
But when we went to Aldi that one time, the universe was literally telling me I needed to make that salad because they had that poppy seed dressing.
Yeah, that's true. You were like, I really want to make this salad. And then we go there and there's the dressing. And I was like, all right.
Yes. So it was meant to be. And now I'm meant to eat it every single day for lunch until I get sick of it, inevitably.
Yeah, that usually happens with food.
But maybe I won't get sick of it. Maybe I'll just become this super healthy person who's eating this giant salad for lunch with all these fruits in it.
I mean, it'd be really good for like, was that vitamin C, I think?
I have no idea what the nutritional value would be. I feel like a salad has to be more nutritious than eating nothing for lunch.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty much anything is better than nothing.
I'm not a lunch eater. I never have been.
Yeah, I go through phases, I think.
If I skipped breakfast, then I'll eat lunch. But if I eat breakfast, sometimes I'll just forget about lunch. Or I get so busy doing other things that lunch is just forgotten. And then it's 3:00 and I'm like, well, I'll be eating dinner in like 2 hours.
Right. You can't eat lunch at like, 2, 3, because then you're not going to be hungry for dinner.
Exactly. Unless you want to eat dinner at like 8 p.m.
No, I'm not a late dinner eater.
Yeah, I'm not a late dinner person. I never have been. I had friends growing up. They're like, yeah, we eat dinner at like 9:00. And I'm like, what?
Right. It's crazy. Growing up, a good friend of mine used to eat dinner with his family every night at 8:00.
I just don't get it. I'd be starving.
Right. I'm like, you get home from school at like 3 and then you have to wait until 8 p.m. to eat. I'm like, I'm starving by the time I get home.
Yeah, I'm starving when I get off work at 4 p.m.
Yeah, I usually roll into like the last end of day meetings, like stomach already growling because I'm ready to go.
So I guess I'm obsessed with that salad and I guess just food in general. So now getting into this episode,
the book portion.
I am reading many, many things right now, and they're all pretty good. I committed myself to this little readathon for the past few days where we are basically, it's a group of us in a group on Instagram, and we all had to set a reading goal that we wanted to do for these 3 days. And I was a little overly ambitious with mine. I said I would read for 15 hours total. So far, it's the last day of the readathon, and I'm at a whopping 4 hours.
So it means you got 11 more hours. You could do that.
I don't
Actually,
think so.
No, you literally cannot.
Yeah, no, it's just I will not be meeting my goal for this. But that's okay. My goal is to finish at least one of the books that I am reading by the end of today.
I think that's still a good goal.
I think I can do it because I'm about 70% into 2 of them. So I think if I pick one and I just read that for the rest of the night, I can finish it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And also maybe I can make it to 8 hours.
Yeah, you could. You could definitely do that.
Still not meeting my goal, but it's okay.
No, but in your defense, we did have a very busy weekend. So
we did.
Like we were not home at all on Saturday.
No, but we got to see the koalas.
We did get to see the koalas.
We saw the koalas, and that was super fun, even though they weren't looking at us. But I saw their little feet and their little hands wrapped around their little tree.
Yeah, hugging the tree. That was very adorable.
And they had both koalas separated because I didn't know this, that male koalas are so territorial that they'll fight each other.
Yeah, I learned about that when I did some of the Wikipedia reading for it, but I didn't think that was as fun of a fact.
I mean, it's really not that fun of a fact, but it's just interesting that these two koalas are basically just isolated from each other.
Right. You would think that they would want some sort of social interaction, but as we learned.
Yeah, koalas are antisocial.
Exactly.
They don't want to talk to nobody.
Nope.
They didn't even want to look at us looking at them at the zoo. But they had just eaten lunch apparently. So they were sleepy.
I mean, I usually take a nap. Well, want to take a nap after lunch.
Back to the books. Little tangent there with koalas. Just had to give that update. So I also recently finished a book and it was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It was called Sunflower Sisters by Martha Hall Kelly. And this is a Civil War era historical fiction.
You don't see those very often.
You don't, and I feel like it's very hard to accurately pull it off because the Civil War was such a complex era in American history.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a lot that went on, as I learned even more from this book. And this book is actually based on true events. Sunflower Sisters is technically the 3rd book in a trilogy, but they're basically a trilogy of standalones, so you don't have to read them in any particular order. I did read the 2nd book in this trilogy, Lost Roses, last year, and that was a Great War era historical fiction, and that was really interesting. But I still need to read the 1st book in the trilogy called Lilac Girls, which is World War II era. So basically it starts out World War II, then it goes back in time to the Great War, and then the final book, which I just read, Sunflower Sisters, goes even further back in time to the Civil War.
So the next one would have to be like the Revolutionary War?
It would be cool if she was going to do that, but she's not. The author specifically said that this Civil War book is the last one.
That would also be really hard to write about, though.
It would, because there's really not a whole lot of records really about what people's day-to-day lives were like.
Yeah, there's like a lot of ambiguity around that stuff.
Right, like we know about Paul Revere.
Right.
We know the British are coming.
We did know that.
That's about the extent I know of the Revolutionary War.
I guess it would be a very hard thing to write about. I can't imagine. The Civil War already sounds like a very difficult era to write in. So to go even farther back to arguably less complex, but still very complex, it seems difficult.
Yes, but these books are really cool because Martha Hall Kelly, the author, she based them on the Wolsey Faraday family, who was a very prominent family for a very long time. They did a lot of charitable work, I guess you could say. They were abolitionists in the Civil War. They were just very prominent in society. And she fell upon their stories somehow when she went to visit, I think, one of their historic mansions on the East Coast. And she just created these books from there. So these books are based on real people and their real stories.
That's very interesting.
Yes, she's done a lot of research. She put in her author's note of Sunflower Sisters that her research actually included reading all of these letters that the family wrote to each other. And she actually put some of those letters word for word into the actual books.
That's really cool because, like, that's a fantastic way to obviously learn about somebody's personality is their own writing.
Right. So by reading all of these letters, she was kind of able to figure out their personalities and therefore create these books based on them while keeping their characters historically accurate as possible.
That's super interesting.
Yes. So Sunflower Sisters specifically was told from the point of view of Georgie Wolsey, who was one of the socialites and abolitionists. And then we had a enslaved girl. Her name was Gemma. And then we had the point of view from Gemma's slaveholder, Anne May. By having all 3 of these points of view, I feel like it really rounded out the story and really brought into perspective everything that happened during the Civil War. Because obviously the Civil War, Union versus South, the Confederate States. And it was a very bloody battle. Georgie Woolsey was a Civil War nurse. So she actually recounted firsthand in letters and a book that she wrote about her experience in the Civil War, which was used as part of the research for this book. So all of whatever was described in her point of view specifically was actually kind of what happened in Gettysburg and other fields for actual fights in the Civil War.
Right. So like firsthand accounts.
Yes, which was really cool to learn. And then her research for Gemma, she actually spoke to a woman whose ancestors were enslaved. And she also did research at an actual old plantation that was turned into a museum. So she kind of got a feel for what the slaves actually went through. But her character of Anne May, who was the slaveholder, was a completely fictional character because she couldn't find, I think it was, actual accurate recounts of slaveholders because they didn't really talk about that. And obviously anything that was written would have been super biased. So she kind of had to make it how she thought a slaveholder would react in these certain situations during the Civil War. And Anne May was a nasty character.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised.
Yeah, she was horrible. And I really liked that the author did not try to add anything in her point of view that like tried to justify her actions, because obviously it was so horrible. But the whole book was just very interesting. It was very hard to read at times because it did get so graphic with everything, but it was very well done. And I don't think anyone else could have done it as well as Martha Hall Kelly.
Right. It really seems like she put in the tremendous effort to do all that extra research.
So much research was done. You could tell as you were reading this, like you could just feel that research was done. It was amazing. And that's what I love about historical fiction books that are based on true events, is that I know the research was done, especially when the author includes in the back, like extra reading. Here's what I read. You can read it too. That was really cool. And now I need to go back and read Lilac Girls, which is the first of this trilogy, and then I'll be done with it. I'm back in my historical fiction era, I think. I really love historical fiction.
I feel like every time you read one, you give it like at least 4 stars, if not 5 stars.
I give most historical fiction books I read 5 stars.
Yeah. I definitely think if you took the average, it would be leaning on the higher side of almost 5, if not 5.
So that was Sunflower Sisters by Martha Hall Kelly. I just finished reading that, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's looking to learn more about the Civil War era and read a captivating story about all of these characters. And it doesn't have to be read in order. So you can read this book without reading the other 2 in the series.
That is a nice touch. I like that.
So what are you reading, or did you currently finish anything?
I am still reading The Baptism of Fire. I read 2 chapters since last episode, and it's definitely picked up quite a bit. They finally stopped doing the thing like that TV shows do, where it's like essentially just recapping over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. There must be something I'm missing. I feel like I have to look it up because I don't know why he keeps doing it in this book. There was like 3 separate instances where they were like, hey, let's do a recap of all the stuff for some reason.
Is he recapping it from different people's perspectives?
No, and that's the worst part. Like basically what happened is they're traveling with this Geralt and Dandelion. Dandelion. I'm pretty sure it's Dandelion. They're traveling with this woman. I'm blanking on her name. It's like Milva or Mira, something like that. It's with an M. And she keeps telling Geralt, like, don't go here. There's a war happening, all this kind of stuff. And then they're like weirdly being vague, not telling her why. And at the whole point, slight spoiler, that they're in search of Ciri and tangentially Yennefer. but Geralt never admits that because he can't show affection to her for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, there was multiple times where if Geralt just went, yeah, I'm searching for Ciri, I think it would have just cleared everything up. But then once she found out, Dandelion went into this like whole thing about, you know, he has to save her, blah, blah, blah. He's also an idiot. And then it was like a chapter later, they did like the whole conversation again, explaining it again to her. There was other people there, but it was the conversation was still directed at her. It even specifies at one point, Dandelion's like, I don't know why you're talking about this again. And she like shows up out of nowhere and is like, because it's directed at me, not you. And I was just like, I don't get why we're doing this.
That's a little strange, but there has to be a reason for it.
The only thing I can think of is what I had thought previously is I wonder if this book was like released with a big gap between the previous book. And so maybe they don't want to force the person to go back and read it again. And they're kind of, because every time they did explain it, they went into a little bit more of the details and there was a little bit more revealed. So I think that was kind of a part of it. But still, I was like, as somebody who's already binged the other ones, you're kind of beating whatever they call it, a dead horse.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's going to be a even bigger reveal at the end of the book.
I mean, that's possible. It feels like they're gearing up for some good stuff, especially the most recent chapter, because they progressed the books. It did like a perspective change and all that kind of stuff.
So every time this thing is being recapped, is it a character explaining it to somebody, or is it just narration, or?
It's been in character dialogue to each other.
Okay, so every character, this is how I'm seeing it, every character is going to have a different interpretation of whatever it is they're recapping, and every character is going to know different stuff. So maybe the final recap by whatever character it's going to be is going to have like this whoa kind of moment.
I guess that is an interesting perspective, because now that I think about it, the like first time it was explained by Geralt, and then the second time it was explained by Dandelion, and then there was a third instance where it was like in hushed tones, but it was a conversation with multiple people. So, but neither of which were Geralt or Dandelion. So I guess that is a good point. It could be sort of to subvert my expectations as the reader.
The author could also be trying to mislead you as the reader by having everybody recount it separately.
I have noticed that there was one time where someone left, well, I don't know if it was deliberate, but there was information that was left out that I know about because of the previous book, but I was curious, you know, and that's when it started to ramp up, and like the chapter after that got quite a bit more interesting. So I guess I'll just have to hurry up and read it.
I guess you will, but it's good that you are making progress. I am trying to make progress on my Son of Neptune buddy read, Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. It is the second Heroes of Olympus book. I'm actually eyeball reading this one. I did audio for a lot of the Percy Jackson books and for the first Heroes of Olympus book. And I just find that when I eyeball read, I retain the information better. So with the Heroes of Olympus series, there are a lot of characters introduced, like a lot. The first book, The Lost Hero, follows a completely different set of characters than the Son of Neptune. So it's a lot of information to keep track of, especially with every single character's backstory and which god that they are descendants of. I definitely recommend eyeball reading the Heroes of Olympus series. But it's interesting because Heroes of Olympus combines Greek and Roman mythology. So this book is called Son of Neptune because Neptune is the Roman version of Poseidon. And it's very interesting. I'm learning a lot about Roman mythology, actually. And it is reading a little more as young adult than middle grade. So it is a little more complex writing, a lot of more mature themes, I guess, because the characters now are 16 years old. So they're getting into more heavier topics, heavier quests. Like a lot of these characters have kind of depressing backstories. But it is really good. I am really enjoying this series, and I don't want to spoil anything with Son of Neptune because it is book 2 in the series. Lost Hero is number 1. But Son of Neptune so far, I am enjoying it more than The Lost Hero. And that's because the characters are better.
I do remember reading these a long time ago, but now when you keep talking about them, I've got like FOMO. I really want to read these now.
Some of them are on Kindle Unlimited.
Are the Percy Jackson books on Kindle Unlimited?
They are. Percy Jackson is on Kindle Unlimited, and then the Heroes of Olympus books are, except for book 4, which is stupid. Like, why can't you just put all of them on there?
Couldn't tell you. Call up Rick.
I don't think Rick has any kind of say in where his books end up. It's probably the publisher, which I think is Disney.
Disney? Really?
Disney's publishing house, Disney Hyperion.
Oh, yeah. I guess they made the movies, didn't they?
They made, I don't know how many movies it was, but it was really bad. But on Disney Plus, there is a new Percy Jackson TV show.
I did see that. Also, the first movie, because I think there's 2. The first movie I liked. I thought that was good.
Well, it's not accurate to the book, which is everyone's gripe with it.
Yeah.
And they think it's kind of ridiculous.
Maybe we'll have to reserve movie or book to movie adaptations for another episode because I have strong feelings about it.
All right. Well, according to the Percy Jackson and the Olympians fans out there, they don't think the movies are good.
I think that is fine. I would have overall, I would agree with that opinion, but I think the movie is still good, but it's not a good book adaptation.
That's fair. Back to Heroes of Olympus. This is for my Percy Jackson buddy read. The buddy read has been extended to include this series because we want to read the other 2 Percy Jackson books that were released years after the original series. But to read those, you have to read the Heroes of Olympus series first. So that is where we're at. And I will be in this Percy Jackson buddy read for the rest of my life, apparently.
Yeah, because isn't he releasing more books now too?
I'm pretty sure. So it's just never ending, which is fine. It's a great group of people in the buddy read. But part of me is just like, I wish I could absorb these books by osmosis because I would like to read something that's not Percy Jackson for a change.
Yeah, I could see that getting a bit old after a while.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. So currently reading Son of Neptune. And then I see on our little notes, you have a DNF on there. Can you explain what this DNF is?
I do, and I will. This DNF is my first ever officially documented DNF.
Okay.
Which I believe that is accurate. I don't think I've DNF'd anything else. There's things that I just never renewed, but if I didn't have to renew them, I probably would have finished them.
You just stopped reading them.
Right. Which I guess is the literal definition of DNF, but
there's kind of like a different connotation, kind of like if you declare a book as a DNF, a did not finish, then that usually means that there was some overarching reason that made you want to not finish it.
Right. And I guess that's the context. This is my first declared one because I am declaring I will not finish this.
You will not finish it ever in your lifetime.
Exactly. This is Aeronauts Windlass by Jim Butcher. And I've read some of Jim Butcher's books before, so it's nothing against him. But the premise of this book was super interesting. It was pirates with a sci-fi element to it. And I was listening to the audio, and there's this weird, I guess trope maybe is the right word. I'm not entirely sure. But they were officers, and in military parlance, there was this officer guy. There was some lower privates, or I can't remember the exact terminologies they were using. But there was also this weird high school dynamic, which I thought was really odd because they're all supposed to be what I interpreted as in their 20s. And they're supposed to be, pirates or Navy, that kind of thing. So it was kind of these two worlds of one half, there's this sort of military vibe happening. And then all of a sudden this guy's bullying the cat girl and making fun of her in the classroom, and then the main character girl's like standing up for her, and like, I don't know, he challenges the cat girl to a duel, and then like now they're gonna fight to the death, which is somehow allowed even though they're in high school. Like, I was like, okay, I'm no longer interested in this. This is too odd for me.
That's kind of weird. But was it like, I guess I don't even know how to articulate my thoughts on that.
They weren't, and I guess I should clarify, they weren't in high school, but they like had class for their military learning, I guess, which is normal. That's accurate to like real life. But because of this class aspect, it had crazy like cliche high school vibes. And especially because there was a big bully rich kid who was like from a wealthy family or whatever, who had his little posse, and the posses are all from wealthy families, but not as wealthy as his. Like, it was literally reading like a high school drama TV show, like something you'd see on Nickelodeon. And I was just like, I'm not really interested in this anymore.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
It made it very hard to relate to, I think, is what the killer of that was. If you were like in high school or that kind of thing doesn't bother you, I think it was very interesting. The other part, when you actually got to learn about the other main character, and he's like in this big battle with the ship and all this kind of stuff, that was super interesting and super cool. So if you can get through the high school aspect, then I think it would be a really good book, but I couldn't, especially on audio. I think if it was eyeball reading, I might have been able to muscle through it because I can just kind of like skip over and let my eyes glaze over the parts I don't care about. But with ear hole reading or ear hole listening, I guess, it's kind of hard to ignore the rich guy making fun of the cat girl.
It is, yes, but that's okay. It's on to better books.
Exactly.
So do you have anything that you are wanting to start reading?
I want to try another audiobook, but I don't know exactly what. I do really want to read the Percy Jackson books again, so maybe I'll put that onto my list.
The audios for Percy Jackson are so good. They're so good. They're so fun. They're so immersive.
Maybe I'll put that onto my list then.
But because it is a middle grade series, I know you had a problem with this in another audiobook you read. They do voices for the characters, but it makes it more fun in my opinion.
Is it like one person narrating doing all the voices?
It was kind of hard for me to tell. I think so.
Okay.
Because the entire Percy Jackson series is told from the perspective of Percy. But, well, yeah, because the girls' voices were like super stupidly high pitched. So I think it is just one guy doing it. But I think he did a good job, like especially with the monsters' voices and stuff and the gods. Like, he did well and it was fun.
I guess I'll give it a try. Worst case is I switch to the eyeball reading.
So those are good audiobooks. Even if anyone's looking for a fun, easy audiobook, I highly recommend the Percy Jackson series. Even if you're an adult, they're still fun. So I am also currently reading 2 other books. I have been slowly making my way through the final book in the Edens series called Sable Peak. And that's by Devney Perry. And this one takes place from the points of view of Mateo and Vera. And I love them together. They're so good. I love Vera. Vera has a very interesting point of view in this book. I'm not going to get into too many details because the Edens is just so good that I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But all of the books are on Kindle Unlimited, and they're these little interconnected romance books. They're very easy reads. They're a little spicy sometimes, but that's okay. You can just click through them if that's not your thing. But they are considered romantic suspense novels because they do include a more like mystery tension kind of aspect to them aside from the romance. Obviously, the romance is front and center, but there is usually like some sort of either police investigation or just someone else's own personal investigation, but there's usually some sort of like thrillery tension that is present and it's there. It's really good. And this is actually going to be a milestone for me when I finish this because it will be my first ever Kindle Unlimited series that I saw all the way through. I usually give up like after 1 or 2 books in a KU series because they're just either not that great, or I lose interest, or I'm just the mood reader in me. But I've stuck through with the Edens. So
there you go.
And I definitely want to read all of Daphne Perry's backlist. I'm pretty sure all of her books are on Kindle Unlimited.
Oh, that's nice.
That's what I will be doing with my time. And then I'm also reading the 3rd Bridgerton book. It is called An Offer from a Gentleman, and this is Benedict's story. Benedict is one of the Bridgerton brothers. So all of the Bridgerton books are about a different Bridgerton sibling. There's 8 of them. So there's going to be 8 books from a different sibling's perspective.
I saw the family tree online.
Yes, so I'm trying not to look at the family tree. They include one at the end of every book because I don't want to be spoiled about who ends up with who in later books.
Oh, I think the family tree that I saw, I guess I've never read the book, so it doesn't affect my reading of it because I'm not reading it. But I remember when I skimmed it, I think it just showed the main blood connected person, not who they ended up with.
Well, in the back of the books, at least the ones that have been newly published, I think the Bridgerton series is in its like, what, 4th or 5th reprint? I have no idea. Because they were originally published in the 2000s, but because Netflix has created a TV show based on them, they've kind of had a resurgence. And there's so many different covers now and different types, and it's just a lot to keep track of. So in the current ones, which are the ones that the library has, they have a family tree in the back, and that family tree shows like who each sibling is married to. And then I believe it also shows children, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But the new books also include a second epilogue, which honestly, I have not been reading the second epilogues because there's a whole novella dedicated to all the second epilogues. So I'll just get there when I get there because the second epilogues really aren't important to the next book in the series because it's just like extra couple content.
Gotcha. It's like the tell-all episode at the end of a reality show.
Yeah, like a bonus episode. An episode that you don't need to watch to understand the show.
Gotcha.
That's what that is. So I have not been reading those because personally, for me, once the book is finished, it's finished. I don't need bonus content because it kind of like sometimes ruins the story for me if I read the bonus content.
Yeah, that's fair. I know the book you're talking about. The one where you read the epilogue and then you were like, the epilogue kind of ruined the book.
Icebreaker by Hannah Grace.
Yeah.
That was the book. That epilogue was so dumb. It didn't even make any sense. I'm not going to get in there because I have many thoughts on that stupid epilogue.
Your whole demeanor changed.
It brought the book down a whole star from reading the epilogue. The epilogue made no sense with that book. Like literally, it just like the characters and their actions in the epilogue. I'm like, this makes no sense for you people and what your ambitions were in the rest of the book. So it was dumb. And other people I've spoken to have also said that the epilogue was not necessary.
We do not stan epilogues in
we
this
don't
household.
We don't stan epilogues. I'm just not an epilogue person. Sometimes if the epilogue wraps up your story nicely and it makes sense with everything else that has happened in the story, I'm fine with that. But last chapter, last sentence is usually where I'm like, okay, we don't need any more. But then I flip the page and it's like epilogue 2 years later. And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't want that.
I remember seeing somewhere that an epilogue should not be another chapter.
That's what they are now, though.
Yeah.
Like authors are including these epilogues that are just like a whole other chapter to the story, which I guess you do you. But as a reader, if there's not a prologue, I don't need an epilogue.
That is also a very important aspect too.
That was always what I was taught in English classes growing up. I feel like it was always like, if you have a prologue, you should have an epilogue. But if you don't have a prologue, you shouldn't have an epilogue.
The whole point of one is like what you said, is it's supposed to wrap everything up. It's supposed to close all the loose ends of whatever you might have. And then the prologue is supposed to set all of that stuff up. So it's like if you don't have one, then there's nothing to close. So
yeah, the prologue sets the scene. Usually it's some sort of like ambiguous mystery kind of thing that's happening. And you as a reader are like, ooh, what's going to happen? And it introduces you to the themes of the story.
Right.
And then you have your actual story. Last sentence of the story's over. But then you have the stupid epilogue at the end. And it just kind of like, if your story was wrapped up, last sentence of the last page of the final chapter, you don't need an epilogue.
Extremely true.
That is just my hot take. I don't need this flash forward of 2 years that or whatever that people feel the need to include now. I don't need that. I'm probably in the minority with that one.
It's fair.
Anyway, that's my hot take on epilogues. Back to An Offer from a Gentleman. I'm only on chapter 3 of this book. I haven't gotten very far, but it is good so far. I'm thoroughly intrigued. It seems to be a Cinderella retelling because you have your character, your female character, who was illegitimately born to this earl, and back in the 1800s, that's just not okay. But the earl lets her live with him because she doesn't have any other family. However, he doesn't really pay her any attention. And then the earl marries this lady, and she has 2 daughters. So they're now the earl's stepdaughters, and they're nasty to this one girl. And so it's just giving off very much Cinderella vibes. And then you have her one maid who is very nice to her, and she's kind of like the fairy godmother. So the earl died. Spoiler, I guess. Not really. This happens in like the first 25, 30 pages. When he died, the stepmother kept her in the house, but she has to basically do work. Like she's basically a maid now. Like how Cinderella was. She had to clean the house.
Right.
And the 2 other daughters get to do whatever they want. They get to go out in society and go to balls and all this stuff. So the one maid gives Cinderella Jr. a chance to sneak out and actually go to this ball and dress up because it's a masquerade, so nobody's going to know who she is. And it's just, I'm loving the Cinderella vibes. It's so good so far.
That sounds fun. I always like those sort of retellings or re-envisions of the classic stories.
Yeah, and it's cool that it's set in the Regency era, so it's like a Regency era Cinderella. An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn, Bridgerton book number 3, also currently reading. I thought about starting a 4th one, but I feel like starting a 4th current read would just be a lot. So maybe next episode I'll have that book lined up and ready to read. So we have a lot of good current reads happening right now. I actually need to work through some of mine. So hoping I can finish at least 2 within this next week. And hopefully you can finish your Witcher book.
Yeah, with my goal.
Yeah.
30 minutes a day.
That would be good. 30 minutes a day is a good goal to have for reading, because then you kind of aren't barred by a page limit. Like say you read 10 pages, but then something really good is about to happen. Then you got to read more than 10 pages.
Right.
You don't have to stick to goals either.
That's true. It's just a good incentive.
It is a good incentive. I love goals. I never stick to goals, but I like goals. Before we sign off, are you looking to bake anything or cook anything this week?
Yes. This week, I want to make basics with Babish's cornbread.
I'm so excited for that. I love cornbread.
The Southern style cornbread. This does mean I have to pull the cast iron skillet out of storage, which I unfortunately neglected. So it needs to be reseasoned completely. But the beauty about cast iron is that you can beat the crap out of it and it'll still get back up. So I think it'll be all right.
I'm very excited for it. I'm excited for you to keep working your way through those cookbooks that you got.
Yeah, I'm also trying to use that as part of my quarter life crisis. Like, hey, go back and do those things that you wanted to do before. Let's try that again. So that's also on my list of things to do.
Yeah, plus we'll get to eat more things, like things that we wouldn't normally eat.
That's true. There's a lot of stuff in there that's not typical for like our rotation of meals. So I definitely think it'd be a good way to spice things up.
I don't know about you, but I am ready to go finish one of my books. And I'm sure you're ready to get your 30 minutes of reading in today.
Absolutely.
To everyone out there, thank you for listening. Go read a good book, set yourself some mid-year goals, reading or otherwise, and happy reading.